Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Q&A sessions with Meeta and Tosh. Hi, Tosh.
Hi, morning, Meeta. How you doing? You all right?
Very well, thank you. Welcome to everyone. Just while we're getting everyone in the room, sorry, Tosh, you were going to say something.
I was going to say, same format for anybody that does know or doesn't know. You know, we're going to be covering a couple of topics that Meeta's going to go through. We'll be doing a Q&A throughout and at the end. And then if any questions are not addressed, we will be doing a follow-up video in the usual way to make sure every single question is answered. The new time slot was really by you guys asking for it to be a bit earlier. 11 o'clock seemed to be a better time.
And a Thursday rather than a Friday. We understand that people are still working remote day, even though we're all at home. A lot of people do the condensed week, so we thought Thursday would give everybody a bit more room to attend. So there's a really big turnout today. The topic we're discussing today is all about going from surviving to thriving. For those of you who've been following our webinars over the last 4 or 5 weeks, you know that our topics have been very much around, holy crap, what are we going to do now? And through understanding the market, through talking to each other, we've all been able to find our way. And we've got the furlough grants in process. A lot of other questions have been answered, but now we're set with a whole new set of questions. So
I think, Meeta, the thing that's happening at the moment is there's so many people putting stuff out there, you know, like we are, I suppose. They're doing webinars, they're doing this some stuff to read, or you're looking at the government website. The idea of this particular model that we're doing for you is to just sort of demystify all the different information that's out there, just decipher it down to the stuff that really matters. And I don't mean just the law. We're here to do the practical advice as well. How do you do these things? How do you take these steps? This is not theoretical. This is stuff that Meeta has been doing as a business owner herself. And obviously I've been advising lots of business owners. So, what I'm saying is when you don't know what to do, what can you do? You ask somebody who knows. We genuinely want to help. We're putting a lot of good out there. That also means you can call us if you don't feel too shy to ask a question here. So that's the general format, but I hope the feedback is people are feeling that vibe, and that's what we're trying to do, right?
Yeah, and that's why we're continuing. So as long as you want it, we'll do the sessions on a weekly basis. So today, the format remains Q&A sessions. We've got titles, as you know, from what you signed up to, but the sessions are led by you and the questions you have. As Tosh said, if there are less questions, then I will bring forth the questions that I have taken from our business community that we've been speaking to day in, day out. We try to get an understanding. So what we're going to be talking about today really is what return to work is going to look like.
Meeta, I just wanted to say one more thing. Sorry to break the flow. There's a chat box on the side. I'm sure you guys, Joe, hi there again from Impact Factory.
So
Meeta's going to be checking that chat box for any questions. Don't wait until the end. If you've got questions, we're going through it. We'll dip in and out, and then we'll go through everything at the end. But so do please use the chat box, okay?
Yeah. 100%.
Sorry, carry on. Let's get stuck in.
Okay, so there's going to be a lot of areas to consider for going back to work. 2 areas that Tosh and I are going to be covering on both the logistical and the legal side are around the office, how we structure the office, and commuting. We know that there's a lot of talk around different ideas. So again, we're going to be thinking about what potential solutions there are and what implications there might be, both legal, ethical, and we'll talk through some of those. The second area that we would like to cover off today with you, again from feedback, is holidays and absenteeism. We've already had 6 weeks in lockdown, and there have been organisations asking questions around, can we ask people to take a holiday, and so on and so forth. However, as we go back, I know that I'm really pulled in 2 ways. Obviously, I want to get back to business, want to get the world back to normal, our new normal, as they say. But we're nervous, have the government been right in the way they locked us down? We've had the highest death rate in Europe. Are we getting out of lockdown in the right way? So there's a lot of health and safety and bigger questions to answer. So we're going to be looking a little bit around ideas around then. And as always, it's going to be a live Q&A session. So if you do have questions, please give them to us. If we can't answer them all in the session, Tosh and I always come back with a follow-up video to make sure we've answered all the questions. But for now, I think we are going to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not theoretical. A lot of this is application for you guys to take away and start using straight away. Okay, so this is not just a some sort of, do a little chit chat about the topics. We're going to give you some actual suggestions and ways to get around these headaches.
Yeah, so I thought I always like to look at some statistics, and some of the statistics coming forward today are around the fact that working life has changed. I mean, organizations are going to be using less office space, and people are going to be wanting to work from home. So 59% of workers will now be asking to work from home for at least 2 days a week going forward. That is from a company called Spacelab, and flexible working rights are going to be going through the roof. So Tosh, tell me a little bit about how we can expect to manage that on the ground. How can employers manage that?
Do you mean the flexible working, or do you mean liabilities for employers? Which areas are we covering right now?
I think I'd like to start with, organizations are now looking at how to structure the world, but within that, if employees are going to start asking for flexible working, what would the answers? Sorry, I'm just looking that Monique is having difficulties seeing us. I'm really sorry about that, Monique. One of the team will have a look to see why this isn't working. Hope other people can see us.
Yeah, if everybody else can see us, can you just put a yes, please, or something like that? Or obviously, if you can't see us, you can't put a no if you can't hear us.
Yeah.
You put a yes if you can just hear what we're talking about, okay?
Yeah. So it's good to talk about how flexible working requests are dealt with, just to give everyone a reminder.
Okay, so the flexible working request is a right that anybody has. Yeah, we've got lots of yeses now. They can hear us. Flexible working request is something that anybody can make that relates to how they want to work. So I think the issue will be at the moment, when are people going to come back to work? When it's either when the economy picks up, or there's going to be some tough decisions if the coronavirus job retention scheme is not extended, which is 3 months from the 1st of March, right? So end of May effectively.
End of June.
End of June, sorry, effectively, yes. Yeah. So the issue is what's going to happen after that. Then there'll be requests to come back to work and so forth. As an employer, you only have to do what is reasonable in those circumstances to accommodate. I know lawyers is reasonable is a lawyer's dream word. We'll sit there arguing it for ages. But the point is what is reasonable, what can the company do according to the size and administrative resources of that business to be able to accommodate that request? Normally it will be reduced working or part-time working from home. The issue obviously is that what we now know is all those times companies have said, no, we can't work from home, won't happen. It was just a lie, because obviously everybody's been able to do it. I appreciate it's not as desirable as being in the workplace, and that'll still be the case.
Yeah, mindset shift, isn't it, for organisations?
That's right.
Some will have gone through that mindset shift and decided, right, we're going to create more flexibility. From our business perspective, and what we advise our clients is creating flexibility for your workforce actually gives you more longevity in that role. They will stay for longer. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Absolutely.
And the more balance that we get, the more you'll retain your staff, which we know is a big cost on the industry. So it's
one of the things I think people need to be aware about is they're very fearful about whether you go to work, don't go to work, can I bring them in? As an employer, your obligation is to provide a safe place and system of work, whether that's at home or whether that's in your office premises. So in the current environment, if people are worried about what's my liability as an employer if I get my staff to come into work, which you can do, actually, the liability will be, well, have you taken reasonable steps to provide them with a safe place of work or safe travel or safe whatever the circumstances are? If you've covered those reasonable steps, well, then you're not going to be on the hook should something happen to that particular employee because you've done everything reasonable. What is reasonable, as I say, we can sit there discussing it for ages. It depends on the nature of the work. But you've got to have some rules in place.
Yeah. So Marcus has asked if there's a form that we could provide they could provide their employees so that a request is clearly structured. Well, Tosh and I love giving away some free support. So Tosh, would we be able to put something together and send it out to everyone?
Absolutely. I mean, the form we're talking about is for flexible working.
Yeah.
So it's actually a form that is given to an employee. It is an employee that must request make a flexible working request. And they'll put that in a letter. So there's no form necessarily as such. And they can only make one request a year.
Okay.
There is an appeal process and it's slightly more complicated in that sort of sense. But yes, there's no form as such, Marcus. They have to make the request. If they make the request, then you tell them what the process is. And I can talk to you about that separately.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you, Tosh. So 59% of workers, as we said, are going to be requesting at least 2 days from home. Already, this is from the TUC, and we know how the trade unions are fighting really hard for safety in the workplace for people. 39% of workers are concerned that there's not going to be enough safety. We have already started engaging with health and safety providers. And funnily enough, Ashley has just asked a question around health and safety. Ashley will answer that right after this. We're looking at companies are setting up crisis management teams. So really brainstorming every possible challenge and coaching through every possible scenario. So a lot of clients have been asking us about health and safety providers. So whether they're on a contract, whether they go and do a 3-month secondment, whether they do it on a consultancy basis, these are really,
issues.
Key issues and key demand skills that organizations need that aren't always in their world. So facilities managers may have some knowledge, but this is quite unique. So Ashley is asking what health and safety and or risk assessments should take place for those working from home. Okay, so you touched on that, Josh. Would you be able to expand on that for us?
Absolutely. The most obvious, look, most home working environments are going to be safe, aren't they? I'm going to put that in the 90s. Let's say 99%. There's not going to be an issue of somebody working from home if you've got the right equipment, what you need, a laptop, a phone, and so forth. The first thing to ask is ask the employee, is there anything that is unsafe about the work environment that they have at home that would make it difficult for them for as an employer to provide a safe system and place of working? That's the normal answer. And the normal answer is going to be no, it's fine. Maybe, if there's a disability issue, there might be some adjustments that are required. Maybe it's a certain type of chair, or those sorts of things, but they're fairly easy assessment and low cost.
You can do that assessment on Zoom as well. So those sort of setting your team up on an ergonomic perspective was something we did in the office. So we can then do that on Zoom. So if there are going to be people working from home, there is going to be a process that we follow.
Just have a grown-up conversation with your employee.
Yeah.
And if they come up with stuff that makes things difficult to work at home, then you find out a way around those things. If you can't make them work at home, that's a different scenario altogether, whether that's disability, dismissal or furloughing or what have you.
So one of the challenges has been that, we're all trying to follow government guidance. And when they said stay at home, we all stayed at home. Some of these health and safety challenges didn't arise because it was such an emergency. But now that we're going to be asking people to come back into the workplace, they've been talking about the 2-meter distance. So Sir Patrick Vance said, no, it can't go down to 1 meter. It has to be 2 meters. Some organizations are talking about working back to back rather than facing each other. Other organizations are investing in the Perspex screens to protect their workforce. And obviously there's a staggered time as well. Helen's actually been asking about top tips for reintegrating employees who've been furloughed. I mean, all of this comes into that really, because our employees need to feel safe and looked after, don't they? Yeah,
and your obligation as the employer is to do that. So whatever whatever your rules are, it depends obviously on the nature of the work, whether it's wearing a mask, whether it's having 2 meters apart, whether you need actual protective equipment of some sort, depending on the nature of your work. Obviously, those are all things that the employer must provide if it's reasonable for you to do so. Reasonable means taking into account cost, administrative resources, what the needs are for the job, and to protect the employee. If you miss that, then you'll be on the hook for it. If you cover those things, you'll be fine.
And I think that is really key. We always talk about process when dealing with employees because it's about them knowing that we've done everything in the right way. And Tosh, you've hit the nail on the head again. The reasonableness, the adjustments, the financial impact. And so really taking all of that into consideration like you would any challenge around employees. So the process is the same, but it's different problems that we're trying to fix now, isn't it?
Correct. There's a flip side to that discussion as well, Meeta, which is if employees are refusing to go to work when there's a safe system of work being provided. So there's something called health and safety dismissals. So if somebody raises a health and safety concern and they think it's a serious and imminent danger, which I suppose this would be regarded that right now, not potential risk, but serious and imminent danger right now, and the employee refuses to come to work, regardless of length of service, if an employer dismisses that employee, that's automatically unfair in law. And the award is uncapped. Depending on various factors, it's uncapped. So it could be until they retire, effectively, if you could show that they can't get a job as a result after that. So it's loss of earnings. So what I'm saying is you can make employees come to work, and if they're refusing, the refusal has to be reasonable. So again, that comes down to you being able to say to yourself, well, hang on, we've got these in place, these rules in place, that's in place, that's why you're protected. If they still say no in those circumstances, you may be entitled to terminate their employment.
but you've got to be really careful because
you've got to make sure that you put things in place reasonably to accommodate those concerns. Reasonable is an objective test, right? What would a reasonable person say or think in those same circumstances? It doesn't mean do everything possible. It just means do what's reasonable.
Yeah, thank you. I actually saw on one of our clients' website, they'd already done 3 areas that they wanted to promise their employees and stakeholders that they would cover. So safety, distancing, following guidelines. They had their return to work sort of values listed on their website. I thought that was a really nice touch and something that I would... transparent and shows the intentions, and again becomes the basis upon which all decisions are made and everyone's treated fairly and safely. Yeah, of course. That's the right way. So our next topic was going to... Actually, let's talk a little bit about commuting, because there has been a question, and then we'll talk about holidays and absenteeism. So Jennifer asks, and one of the topics we wanted to cover was around commuting, because we know that the government are talking about staggered return times. Obviously, they're talking about people working from home where they can. So again, there's going to be that balance of, well, employees arguing, well, the government say if we can work from home, then we should. Whereas employers may say, well, I want you in the office. How would we deal with something like that, Tosh? Again, it's probably similar to what we just talked about.
Reasonable means how can you justify your decision? If you break it down to that, right? So if an employee is challenging, so don't forget what the government is saying is still guidance. It's not law. You're not going to get arrested for it. And they're going to strongly suggest you go home and all those things. Absolutely. But at the same time, the employee doesn't have to come into work just because the employer says so if they think it's serious and imminent danger. So how do you get around those things? You reassure them. We've talked about this in each of the episodes we've done, Meeta, about being really open and transparent with your staff. And most of them are kind of come on board. And the ones that won't and become difficult, well, then you'll take a different approach, which might mean the end of their employment. You've just got to be able to reasonably reassure them of what those genuine concerns are about, right?
Yeah. So before we move on to the transport question and the commuting question, I just want to let Helen know that I will be sending out top tips on how to reintegrate your employees. I've been doing some work on that for our own team, and I'll share those thoughts with you, and I'll share those thoughts with everyone on top tips, how to reintegrate. So Jennifer has a question. So Jennifer asks, for those who work in London-based offices traveling in on public transport, what is the requirement of a company in terms of reasonableness on travel by public transport?
I mean, that's so difficult, isn't it? Because it flies in the face of all the guidance, 2 meters apart. You can wear a mask, I suppose. What can employers reasonably do in those circumstances? You're going to have to tell your employees to exercise their reasonable discretion to take any actions or do anything that is likely to expose them. So if you're going to get on a bus or a train, stay apart from other people. If you can't, you're going to come into work a bit late. That's the reality of it.
Where does our duty of care stop if we're putting them in that situation by telling them to come in? I mean, that's the question in my mind. I know I'm here as an advisor, but as an employer, I don't want to be responsible for anyone catching coronavirus because they had to come into work.
So there's a different scenario there. There's one scenario where you're saying you don't feel responsible, which is possibly a moral discussion. I feel responsible, or whether you're responsible from a legal point of view. From the legal point of view, and it's a balance between both, certainly. But what I'm here to do is to tell you guys what you can do. Then you need to make your moral decision on whether you want to do that or not. Yeah. So all you have to do is, do I want to take the risk? Well, why is there any risk if you've done everything you could reasonably do? I appreciate there might be some risk. But if you've done everything you can reasonably do, you can tell your employees to come into work. If you then choose you don't want to because that risk of 1% or 2% is too great for you, then understandably, you won't ask them to come in. So but don't forget, though, if people don't come in, there's no work being done. If there's no work being done, there's no money being earned. If there's no money being earned and the company dies, well, then everybody loses out. You get nothing.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it's not like I don't want you to weigh up like, well, should I go to work and die, or should I stay indoors and survive? It's not as simple as that. Mm-hmm. It's not as black and white as that. Rather, you just got to see what if they're not if the employer's not doing the right steps, then tell them what you want them to do. But as employers, what we can do is we can make some very, very clear decisions to make it as safe as possible. So for traveling purposes, masks, distance, and all the other rules that you can do in commuting.
Yeah, staggered time, letting people work from home for a few days. You may not decide to do it forever, but we may decide over the next 6 months that people are less exposed, and so you only ask them to come in for 3 out of the 5 days, staggering their time. So in terms of answering that question, it really is about reasonableness, and I would say documenting all decisions so that every employee can see a fair application of the health and safety laws.
You know, what I would say to you, Meeta, is if it was you asking your staff to come in, well, how would you protect yourself coming in? Or how would you feel coming in? What would you need to do to come into work to feel safe?
Yeah,
that's the answer.
My advice is overkill. I don't think you can have enough. You have got to be really, I think, open up slowly. Offer all forms of PPE. I would do masks, even if you do the visors, sit them 2 meters apart. Try and have a shift work approach, so only have half the team in at a time. That your offices aren't big enough to do social distancing. So also communal areas aren't going to be usable. So how are people going to go to the bathroom? And I mean, I guess we can all go to Costa or whatever, but
you rotate, I guess, or something. You clean up yourself, rotate.
Yeah, people aren't allowed to hot desk anymore. So these serviced offices with those big lounge areas, hot desking is going to, well, it's not that they're not allowed, but it's going to be discouraged hugely. So face-to-face meetings, even if you do go back to the office, they're not going to be, they're going to be recommending that nobody actually sits face-to-face.
I think it's really important to remember, everybody, if you haven't remembered, is that the lockdown is not a cure. It's just stopping a spread.
Yeah.
So if they're lifting, and I'm for one surprised that they're lifting it, to be honest. I think it's still early days, but if they're lifting it, there has to be things like what you're saying, Meeta. There have to be things in place that will stop that, because it only takes one for it to just explode all over again, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So there'll be some very strict guidelines as we move step by step. But certainly the indication is obviously the government want people to get back to work. So let's see what happens.
Get back to work. It's getting that right balance of support, safety, and then commerciality of making our businesses work, winning again, being in a winning world. It's definitely, we are literally learning as we go. So we hope this has been useful. Right, I've got some questions. So Thea says, are we obligated to provide desks and chairs? I think that's obviously if people are at home. Are they obligated? Are organisations obligated? No,
most people have got a desk and a chair at home, or a table or something to work. The issue is a safe system of work, not to make it the most deluxe. You can sit on a sofa and work, quite frankly. You've got your phone and your laptop. So there's no obligation as such.
Okay. Got another question here from Sue. So Sue says, can we require a worker to come back to work if they have an underlying medical condition or live with vulnerable people, especially as they might be required to come by public transport? If they refuse, can we then put them on SSP? Very interesting.
Okay. So there's a few heavy questions there. So the first thing is, can you get the worker to come back if they've got underlying health condition? Well, you can. You can, as long as you have put reasonable steps in place to protect them from catching anything. But obviously that's going to be fairly, whatever happens, there will be some degree of risk involved in that, won't there? So if they are unable, so this is the question. Are they really ready, willing and able to work, but there's no work available? That's a furlough scenario. Right? If they're not able to come to work because they are self-isolating or because they're off sick in those circumstances, well, then that can be sick pay. The way that they provide you with a sick note these days is the employee has to contact the NHS 111 online service or the telephone them and get a sick note to cover it. Then they get sick pay, they don't get furlough, and they don't get full pay. So if they're refusing to unreasonably and you put things in place, well, then strictly speaking, that could be a dismissible offence. I think in the circumstances, Sue, that you put there about them living with a vulnerable person, they've got so many different reasons of why they wouldn't want to come in. I think that would constitute a serious and imminent danger, which is what the law says for health and safety dismissals, which means you'll probably just put them on sick pay.
Would that also, how would that work for pregnant people as well, or older people? We know that there are older people that they are going to advise to still, I think it's over 65 or over 70.
When you say for pregnant people, you mean on maternity leave?
Yeah, or somebody coming back who's pregnant.
So if they're pregnant, they're on maternity leave, or they are about to go on maternity leave, presumably it's one or the other, right?
Not if they're in early days. So if they're in their early days and they feel
so they will go on maternity. I see. So it still comes down to the test is, are they ready, willing, and able to work. If they're ready, willing, and able to work, but the employer is not providing that work, they still get full pay. If they're not ready, willing, and able to work because they're off sick for whatever reason, then they'll get sick pay instead.
And maternity being a protected characteristic, would that be treated any differently?
No, because they will either be not coming into work because they're not able to work for whatever reason, in which case they can either take maternity early or what have you. But the terms, if they're not able to work because of the environment and a medical suspension is needed, then they'll get full pay. But otherwise, the key is, what is the reason that the person is or is not at work? If they're off sick, it's sick pay. If they're on maternity leave, it's maternity pay. If they're on holiday, it's holiday. Anything else is either full pay or it's going to be furlough pay because they've agreed to do a furlough agreement, or whatever other arrangements that's been agreed, maybe reduced salary for reduced hours or something.
Yeah, or dismissal if it's not working out.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So Charlotte asks about returning to work 2 days a week, just to gradually build people back up and to not, create a shock for the staff. I mean, yeah, I think that is really sensible, Charlotte. Really, everybody is on tenterhooks. Everyone wants to get back to work. We all want to feel the security of our jobs and the economy building back up. But it really is key to show support and demonstrate that in everything that your return to work policy will demonstrate. So
the difficulty with that, though, Meeta, is let's say you're a full-time employee and your employer wants you to come back for 2 days a week. You're on furlough at the moment. So there's no work there to do or insufficient work. So you're only getting 80% of your salary. Now you're working 2 days a week. You're not getting 80% anymore. You're getting significantly less. So, and it requires unless you've got it in the contract, it requires the agreement of the employee to reduce those hours. And if they fail to agree and you don't keep them on furlough, then that's a redundancy situation.
So there's two things here. The first thing are employees that are working from home at the moment who are not furloughed. I would say that, yes, I think this is a smart way. You can even increase it every week because as we come out of lockdown, there'll be more statistics. We're also learning from Europe. There will be more guidance and direction on the best way forward. But as I said, I would go overkill on personal protection equipment, and I would be cautious in how you expose your people. Try and build in, especially in the first couple of weeks, as much support. So staggered hours, only 2 or 3 days a week. Shift patterns, so half the team are in, half the team are not. If you can rearrange your office to people sit back to back rather than face to face, do that, because we will get back to a new normal, but we will retain our staff and you'll get much more loyalty and commitment if they can see how we've demonstrated to support them and support the organisation equally through this time. And I think that's really key.
Meeta, I'm conscious of time because normally our Q&A session is 30 minutes. I think we were going to go to probably about 22, so maybe another 10 minutes. But we haven't covered the holiday position yet, so I thought we better just dive into that.
Yes, so let's talk about that. So one of the challenges for organisations is that people are either furloughed or they're working from home, and all of a sudden no one really needs a holiday. We can't go anywhere. No one really needs any downtime because it's a very different working environment. As people are starting to get back to work, Tosh, there is the risk of the stress and anxiety that some may experience. We've already spoken about those that choose not to come to work and are put on SSP. Yeah. How can employers manage? Because I think the worry is that we're going to get back to work and then everyone's going to submit for holiday. So how can an organisation preempt that and try to get some structure around it so it doesn't impact the business in a negative way?
Sure. So the first thing I want you to understand is that holiday leave is to be a break from work. That's what it is. That's all it is. A break from work. Okay. Doesn't mean you have to catch a plane. Doesn't mean you have to go into the Bahamas or whatever you do for your holidays. Brighton, seafront, whatever it is. It's a break from work is the first thing. Okay. So at present, employees are entitled to carry over the first 4 weeks. So the full entitlement is 5.6 weeks a year, including bank holidays, right? So the first 4 weeks can be carried over for 2 years. 2 years is the law at the moment, okay? That's the first thing. The remaining 1.6 weeks of each year, either you use it or you lose it, or it carries over according to whatever your contract says. Some contracts might say it'll carry over till March or something like that, right?
So practically, an employer could let everybody know that this is where you are in terms of your holiday. These are the days you have to use or lose, and then and this is what you can carry forward. I think that would be a good piece of communication to go out.
Totally agree. But there's another thing is that the employer can force the employee to take it. It's not desirable, obviously. So if you want to force them to take it, you've got to give twice as much notice of the amount of holiday you want them to take as the amount of holiday you want them to take. So if you want them to take 1 week, you've got to give them 2 weeks notice that you want them to take that 1 week.
And that includes the 4 weeks that can be carried over?
Yes, it does.
Right.
So it's got to be reasonable. I wouldn't like to be the lawyer acting on behalf of the company to say that was reasonable in the circumstances. But here's the issue, isn't it? The issue is that suddenly we're opening the floodgates, and at the end, everybody just goes for their holiday entitlements. Well, the right of refusal for an employer is exactly as it is now. If it's reasonable for the employer to refuse it, then you can refuse it. And reasonable obviously has to mean in accordance with the needs and the best interests of the business. So some people will be able to go on holiday and others won't. It's a first come, first serve, I imagine, is what it normally is. Unless, of course, you've already got certain periods that are already closed for holidays, like Christmas closes, and they automatically have to take that holiday anyway. But number one is you can force them to take the holiday if it's reasonable. They're taking a break from work. Number two is you can refuse a holiday request if it's reasonable for you to refuse that. Gosh, I'm saying that word a lot, aren't I?
Say it one more time.
Reasonableness all the way, people.
Yeah, that is the message, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So again, I really like the way you put it at the beginning. You said there's what we need to do legally, and then there's what we need to do morally and ethically, and that's the balance I'm always trying to make sure is intertwined with policies and processes around the work we do and the advice we give. But in terms of absenteeism, and if an employee openly says, I'm anxious, I'm really worried about coming back, how would an employer deal with something like that, Tosh? So
there's two things to look at, subjectively and objectively. Subjectively means if you're that person, Meeta, subjectively, do you really think you're in danger? Do you really believe in those circumstances? And then objectively, would a reasonable person think the same way? If the two things aren't matched, well, then there's something to address, isn't there? There's a real concern to come back. If they're not matched, then from an employer's point of view, you've got to explain to that employee why what they're saying is not reasonable. And how do you do that? It's what we've been talking about here. We've got these measures in place. These are the rules. 2 meters apart. When you're using the loo, it's that much detail. When you're coming into the office, don't come in twos. Whatever your rules are, make sure everybody knows what those rules are, number one. And number two, make sure that they're implemented. Yeah. Knowledge is nothing without know-how. So it's got to be executed as well, right? Yeah, consistently. So we have some questions here. So Vivian has actually mentioned that they have found that people are struggling if they live in HMO and don't have chairs and tables. So yeah, let's not make any assumptions. Let's check in and let's make sure that everyone is feeling supported and has the right equipment. Oh, yeah, absolutely. If they don't have an environment, the question before was, do we have an obligation to? And I said, there's no obligation unless it's reasonable for you to do that. So most people will have tables and chairs. I appreciate in that scenario, maybe they won't. But then, why can't they do it from their own room? There may be answers to that particular question, but why can't you? I know it's not ideal, but they could sit on their bed with their laptop. So there are scenarios there. It might not be as comfy, but it's about providing a safe system of work, not the most luxurious one. Yeah. So Sheik is asking whether we have any suggestions on communal places. So we've spoken about the fact that kitchens are going to be out of bounds. These are speculations. We know that some of the draft guidances have been released, but we won't really have answers. I think Sunday, when Boris Johnson does his press conference, will be the first time we'll get clarity. And we'll be running another session following on from this next Thursday at 11 to follow up with what we found. So if we don't have the answers today, we will continue to source for the answers and source for options. Bathrooms the same. So Sheik is saying, what about bathrooms? I agree. This is a basic requirement. And if bathrooms aren't allowed in offices, are they going to be allowed in takeaway places like Pret or so on? So these are questions. Imagine the scenario where people are self-isolating and there's somebody that's in quarantine for 14 days, for example. Yeah. So there are families there where there's somebody who might have it or they've got symptoms of it. They've got to isolate within the isolation. What happens if you've got one bathroom? Well, the only suggestion there can be is cleaning it. Clean it after yourself and leave some time as well for it. I don't actually know what the time frames are, where they're talking about COVID-19 on certain services. I know they say it dies in the heat. I know it flourishes in the cold. All those sorts of things. Yeah. But effectively, people have to clean up after themselves and then clean before you go in there. Or if you have a separate bathroom, I suppose, then you separate yourself from everybody else. That's how it would work. But in a work environment, that's how it works.
We're either going to get guidance or black and white rules. So as these updates are released, we will share them with you all. Olivia's asking about holidays, Tosh. So how many days holiday does 5.6 weeks work out to? So 5, 5, 20.
28 days, including bank holidays.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Yeah, I normally do that way as well. I don't know why I said 5. Reading it all these with the recent changes and so forth. So yeah, it's 28 days, including bank holidays for a full-time employee.
Okay. And Sarah is asking. She says, I thought the 20-day carry variation was for companies that have key workers and those who have employees who have needed to cancel leave as a result for their need to work as a result of the COVID-related business. Is it that, or is it everyone, Tosh?
It's everyone. I appreciate it was designed to help those people as well, but it's for everybody. Remember, the issue, though, is whether they can reasonably take the leave or not. And taking the leave doesn't mean taking a flight. So strictly speaking, yes, you can have a holiday at home if employers were really minded enough to do that. They'd have to have some really good reasons. Maybe it's like finances and so forth, or I don't know. I'm making it up now. They need to come up with some good reasons to force somebody to take a holiday leave in this period. That's all.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you, Tosh. I've just been scanning through the questions and I think we have covered.
The one that we didn't cover was the 3 tips bit.
Oh, go for it.
You said you were going to send you were going to send something. It was Helen, and it said, "What sort of tips do you have for reintegration?" I know you said you'd send something, but I thought you could just touch on those 3 points.
Well, first and foremost, I think even now, I think it's key that you have weekly catch-ups with your furlough team. So perhaps do a weekly team drinks. It's a bit like keeping touch days for when people are on maternity and they come back. I think it's really important to let them feel that they're still part of the organisation. I ran a training session for my furlough team yesterday. We had some that weren't, some that are. Really nice for everyone to feel that they're still being upskilled. And I think it's really important that as you start to define what coming out of lockdown looks like, people understand their personal timetable. So pick up the phone to them, take the time to explain to them, have a group chat first and then talk to them individually if you feel that would be a better way to do it so they all feel part of a team. Zoom is fantastic. We've been using Zoom a lot as a team. Everyone gets to interact not only with you but with each other as well. So it creates a bit of the team vibe and people remember what it feels like to be part of something, and that will probably inspire them to want to come back faster and overcome some of the health and safety challenges and getting everyone to work together to do that. And as I mentioned before, I think definitely shift working for your furloughed staff. And we don't know if at the end of June, furloughing is going to fall off the face of a cliff, or as we've seen in the news, it might be tapered. So again, as the news comes out, we will talk to you about how you can integrate the support into your organisation to help this be a smooth transition into business after lockdown.
Well, you know what? The message I also want, I know we've just talked about this right now, but, you know, please try not to over speculate all that static, all that noise in your head about the uncertainty of this, that, and the other. You know, what I'm suggesting is you know, what they say is what's more important than your current breath in life? It's the next breath. You know, and what is it that nobody knows everybody doesn't really know what to do next, but they do it anyway, because you have to do something. So what I'm suggesting is you take your steps, know what you're doing for the next 2 or 3 moves ahead, make some decisions, but know that the limitations are we just don't know beyond a certain point. And if those things don't work, well, then try a different path. But just do 2 or 3 moves ahead and just keep going in that way and speak to people that do know. Please, I can't say it enough. Call us. We're so willing to help. There's no reason you can't get an expert. There's no, surprise bill or something. Just talk to us and we can talk you through certain bits and pieces. And again, just to decipher all the information that's out there to make things easier for you to make decisions for the business, really.
Yeah. We've covered a lot of topics in our sessions and it's been really, really positive to see. I've had some conversations. Some employers are talking about the fact that they have to cover redundancy. We talked about that last week. And outplacement support. So really helping organisations think that if they do have to make people redundant at this difficult time, how to make it as supportive and positive as possible. I've had clients who want to talk about training and, want to think about how to upskill their people who are working and furloughed. So there's some really positive engagement. And that's where Tosh and I are at an advantageous position that we do talk to the business community. We are able to glean of a lot of what everyone's doing and what everyone's thinking, which hopefully will bring things to your attention that you may not have considered and give you the answers to questions that are in your heart and in your mind at the moment. So we hope these sessions are useful. We are nearly at 40 minutes now. Josh, is there anything else you think we need to cover off?
No, I just want to say thank you very much for everybody attending. Yeah. I don't know what the topic is for next week on Thursday at 11. Do you know?
No, we've decided to leave it open because we like to make the topics as current and relevant as possible. So look out for our invites. They will usually go out over the next few days. And please give us your feedback on the forms that we send out to you. These topics are, these Q&A sessions are for you. Is to enhance your working experience and to give you the answers to questions. And when we don't have them, we promise to come back. So give us a call.
And I would say that we're happy to even do case studies for you, your specific problems. You've just got to email us. Email us or give us a call, and then we'll bring it up as a topic of choice. But there won't be a follow-up video this time. I think we've addressed everything right now. So thank you very much for attending again, and stay safe. Until next time.
Thank you, everyone. Have great days.
Bye.
Bye.